Good evening, New Yorkers. And thank you for coming to the first public reading, the first offering of any kind of Truman Capote's new work, In Cold Blood.
Hello, my name is Truman Capote. For this evening's program, I'm going to read some passages from the first three parts of my new book. The village of Holcomb stands on the high wheat plains of western Kansas, a lonesome area that other Kansans call out there. Until one morning in mid-November 1959, few Americans, in fact few Kansans, had ever heard of Holcomb. Like the waters of the Arkansas River, like the motorists on the highway, exceptional happenings never stopped there. Harry Smith's voice was both gentle and prim, a voice that, though soft, manufactured each sound exactly, ejected it like a smoke ring issuing from a parson's mouth. The four coffins, which quite filled the small, flower-crowded parlor, were to be sealed at the funeral services. Very understandably, for the effect was disquieting. Nancy wore her dress of cherry red velvet, her brother a bright plaid shirt. The parents were more sedately attired, Mr. Clutter in navy blue flannel, his wife in navy blue crepe. And it was this especially that lent the scene an awful aura. The head of each was completely encased in cotton, a swollen cocoon twice the size of an ordinary blown-up balloon. And the cotton, because it had been sprayed with a glossy substance, twinkled like Christmas tree snow.
All right, guys, so I just wanted to pop in and do a little bit of a checkpoint with the book. It's quickly evolving. We talked about how the entirety of part one is about kind of building Holcomb, building up the Clutter family, making us connect to them, and then ripping them away from us almost immediately. And so there's very clearly pathos that's going on here. There's very clearly this appeal to emotion, but ultimately, what for is the question that we have to answer. And this book shifts in its goals and its focus and its purpose so much. And part of that, actually a lot of that, is because as Capote was writing it, his purpose shifted as well. One of the interesting things kind of behind the scenes about this is that the killers weren't caught. Dick and Perry weren't caught when Capote started to write this book. He read a little newspaper story in New York, and he said, "This is my book. This is my story. People are accusing me of writing about frivolous things, the life of the elite, but this, in Kansas, this killing, this murder, this is real America. It's raw, it's gritty, it's affecting real folk, the working class, and so this is my way to obtain not only legitimacy, but literary fame." And so he went to that town. He went to Kansas as the story was progressing, and as he wrote for years and years and years. It actually took him about 5 or 6 years to publish this book, to finish it, but as he was writing, the story was growing and the story was developing. So there are just a couple things that I want to kind of talk about. Number one, it first started like this book's purpose was to memorialize the Clutters, right? And it seemed very, very clearly like that's where we were going. Kind of the last moments of their life, the last to see them alive is what part one is called. But now here we are, part two, and the Clutters are absent, right? And so ultimately the purpose shifts a little bit. And this is where I think Holcomb, Kansas, the town itself, becomes a character. We see that this quadruple homicide, this murder that happened in the night, has had drastic impact on Holcomb itself, whether it is, the locks flying off the shelves at the hardware store, or whether it is the fact that they're pointing fingers and blaming everybody around them. Capote really masterfully tracks how, just like a character, Holcomb is growing and changing, evolving, or maybe devolving based on the way you want to look at it. And that's what this book was originally supposed to be, was not, a profile into the mind of the killers, because those killers weren't found. Everybody thought that this was going to be a cold case. Everybody thought that there was no way that these killers would ever be caught. So Capote began writing this book truly about the town itself and how the fabric of that town had shifted. So that's one very clear purpose that I think you guys could work with, right? How does he convey to us this message of how a crime like this can shatter the notion of a perfect town, right? How can he relate the pain and the grief that these people are feeling in a place where stuff like this never happens, right? Certainly he's trying to make some sort of commentary about that, and it's going to be up to you to kind of figure out what that commentary is. But purpose number one may be, here's what happens to a town that is rocked by tragedy. In this part two, we are also introduced to a new character, Alvin Dewey, right? And as we look at Al Dewey, we recognize that he brings a very similar vibe to the story that Detective Geyer, Frank Geyer, the cop who actually ended up catching H.H. Holmes, did to the last book, right? Here's a look inside the investigation of a crime. And in this book, in 1959, Truman Capote was granted access that seems commonplace today, but he was granted access to this live, active crime that no reporter before had ever had, right? He used his guile, he used his celebrity, and he was basically a part of that investigation. He would hear new theories, he would read new leads, he would have dinner at Alvin Dewey's house to learn about breaks in the case, right? And so certainly there's another purpose, right? Is that he's trying to share with the American people the inner workings of the KBI, but of the police department, right? Look at the way that he portrays Alvin Dewey and Alvin Dewey's compatriots and teammates and other officers, and recognize, what is he saying about police work in our country, right? What is he saying about the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and ultimately, what is he saying about Al Dewey, a man who's looking at a crime with apparently no motive, with no suspects, with no clues, basically, and what does he attempt to kind of show us, the readers, about somebody like Al Dewey? But lo and behold, we can see the focus changing in this book, because to Capote, the focus of the book did change as he was writing it. And it seems like once those killers were caught, once those killers were brought in, and once Capote was given access to them, it's there that he realized the true story lies, right? He recognized that the story of Dick and Perry, getting inside the mind of a criminal, or of two criminals here, that's what the true story was. Today, I think we take it for granted that we have Criminal Minds, we have Cold Case, we have Unsolved Mysteries, we have things like 60 Minutes. And so this true crime genre is something that we have at all times on every channel. There's 15 seasons of every different variant of Law and Order. And so that was something that, is very, very, very clear to us on a daily basis. But in 1959, when you read about the Clutter murder in Kansas, everybody wants to know the why, the how, the what, the behind the scenes. They wanted to know the grisly details of not only what happened in that house, but why, what that motive is. And they need it for security so that they know that they can be safe, but they also need it to kind of pique their curiosity as well. And so this is the first time that we've really delved or kind of dived into the minds of a criminal, and Capote was able to do that, right? I'm going to kick it over to Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays Capote brilliantly in a movie aptly called Capote, that's not just about his life, but is actually about the writing of this book. So for those of you who think that, English teachers dive too much into books and ultimately there is no deeper meaning, this movie, the entire movie, is about what kind of inspired him as he was writing this book. And so I want you to watch this clip about his interviews with Perry Smith. I'm going to kick it over there, and then I'll kind of, come back to close things out. But take a peek at this scene from the movie. and see what you think.
But he trusts me, and that's why he gave it to me. He's given me absolutely everything. And he wants so badly to be taken seriously, to be held in some esteem.
Do you?
Do I want?
Do you hold him in esteem, Truman?
Well, he's a gold mine. And he's told me his entire life. His dead mother. He had a brother and a sister killed themselves.
Did you tell him your mama did the same thing?
Yeah, I tell him everything. We've been talking our heads off for the past month. And sometimes when I think how good my book can be, I can hardly breathe. Anyway, this is what I wanted to read you. If called upon to make a speech.
If called upon to make a speech?
I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. A speech just in case he's ever recognized for an achievement. Now, I can't remember what I was going to say for the life of me. I don't think ever before have so many people been so directly responsible for my being so very, very glad. It's a wonderful moment and a rare one. Thank you. There's an exclamation point at the end of that thank you, in case you didn't catch it. Where'd you go?
I guess it stopped being funny.
I never said it was. But wait.
All right, and so as we look at that, we can see that Capote understands that the criminals are the focus of this story, not just because their story is so complex, but because their story is what will be interesting to the normal population, right? He speaks to Harper Lee on the phone and he calls Perry's story a gold mine, right? And he speaks about him not as though he's, a real person with feelings, but as though he's this great character that's going to allow Capote to become this famous author. But Harper Lee asks him this question, right? When Perry tells about how his brother and sister both committed suicide, she says, "Did you tell him that your mama did the same thing?" And so we start to recognize all of these pieces kind of coming together, right? Last time I asked you guys, do you think he's treating Dick and Perry fairly? Do you think he's treating them similarly? And I hope the answer was no. Dick is portrayed as this monstrous criminal mastermind, right? He's portrayed as this person who is unfeeling, this person who has no remorse for what they have done, who's a cold-blooded killer. And Perry, we learn about his childhood. We learn about the tragedy of his parents, of their fight and kind of the love that he was always searching for and never really found. We learn to sympathize with Perry, this young boy who was always misunderstood, who was always kind of on the outside, who was abandoned by his mother, abandoned by his family, and it's impossible for us to not make the connections between Perry Smith and Truman Capote. And so if we're looking for kind of what the purpose of this book is, we've got a lot of them, right? To categorize and to explain how a murder can change a small town, right? To show us and to characterize Holcomb as a character and show its growth and its evolution. To maybe kind of put the populace at ease, to show us that the police care and that they are valued and that they are interested in protecting public safety, right? Maybe it is to memorialize the police service and maybe make an argument for their skill and their prowess. But then clearly to tell the story of the killers, whether it is to dive into the minds and to explain, explain the motives that may have been there, right? Maybe the purpose is to make us feel sympathy, right? Go back to that French inscription and ask yourself, do you think Capote wants us to feel sympathy for the killers? Obviously, he wanted us to feel something for the family that was murdered, but in that same way, does he want us to feel some sort of sympathy for the killers as well? He used a very, very famous line, and I think a very beautiful line. He says, "All things told, that night 4 shots ended 6 human lives." We've got the 4 clutters, and I'll leave it to you to come up with who those other 2 people whose lives ended that night were. Hopefully you guys are really enjoying the book so far. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I'll be able to talk to you about them. I'm very much interested in getting your perspective on what's happening in this book. And so if you have any questions or if you have any comments on things that I've talked about, please make a comment down below of the link of this video, and let me know what you think. All right, we'll check in with you again on Wednesday. Have a good one. We'll see you then.